Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk, lively conversation for all things church transformation. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney Britton, in our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of the U.S. And I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, author and denominational leader, Dr. Kris Tenney Britton, the area minister of the Northeast area of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America. Try and say that 3 times fast. Good morning, Kris.
Good morning, and welcome to Church Talk Live.
Bill and Kris Tenney Britton here today to talk about getting ready for the holidays. And although it's still, the sort of the beginning of fall, if you're not making concrete plans for your holiday season already, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And today we're going to be doing the ABC holiday checklist, A to Z. Everything you'll need to be thinking of and getting planned and taken care of to make sure you have the best guest-friendly holiday season that you possibly can have. And of course, the whole thing is, how do you capitalize on those guests that naturally gravitate to churches during this season?
We don't have a lot of time today to cover all these letters, so we want to point your attention to the handout below, as well as make mention that we have the Holiday Hospitality DVD set, which you may be able to, or you may find to be very, very helpful. But we're going to jump into it, and we're going to start now. Letter A. A is for accessibility. Accessibility, seating accessibility, media. Do people with walkers, can they get in? Is there room? Is there some place to put those walkers? Are there places for children who worm and squirm? If you have rows of chairs, or rather than pews probably, but are they accessible for us fuller figured folks that we're able to get in and out of them without stepping and crunching on people, particularly those of us who are not so squeezable?
Yes, okay. And we're going to talk more about the seating issue when we get to U for ushers. All right, so accessibility. B is for bulletins. If you still use a bulletin, is it guest friendly? And we're going to talk about coded language with C, so we'll not touch on that here. But is it, going back to accessibility, large enough print to be seen? Does it make sense? Does it include all those things that your guests need to know? For instance, if you are going to do communion during your worship service, are they going to rip off a piece of bread and dip it? Or do they have an option between grape juice and wine, etc.? All of that should be there in your bulletin, as well as announcements of what's coming up that they might be interested in. So B is for bulletin. Is it guest friendly?
Also the words to the Lord's Prayer, doxology, a lot of those insider things that many of us know about. But again, for accessibility purposes, you want to make sure that you've got the words that in entirety, because not all of us know all this stuff. Well, what about C for, as you mentioned, coded language? Coded language, UMW, CWF, CWM, on and on we could go. Coded language, spell things out. Not everybody knows where, say, Mary and Jerry live. That's coded language. You've got to be clear.
Well, and coded language includes words like invocation, doxology, even blessing, like, if we're offering a blessing, may not have the same connotation from one person to the next. So watch for your Christianese languaging so that people can understand, your guests understand what you're really talking about. Well, D is for declutter. One of the things that happens during the year is that we tend to clutter things up. Look around with fresh eyes as you walk into your building, into your lobby, into your worship center. Is there a stack of old bulletins over there to the side? Do you have a stack of last month's Our Daily Breads, or are there old hymnals stacked up hither and yon? How about the lost and found? Do you have a bunch of coats and hats left over from who knows when that need to be relocated? And all those boxes, I can tell you that, do a wander through. Are there corridors or rooms that have stacks of boxes? I was in a church recently where there were literally file cabinets lined up and down the hall that were marked to be removed, but had been there for quite some time. They just hadn't quite got removed. So be looking around and make sure you check your church office. What does it look like, just in case a guest shows up? Or anyone else for that matter.
Thank you. Well, E is for encourage. You know, this is just a completely or a terribly stressful time for a whole number of reasons. Suicides, we know, are up. We've got people worried about finances and money, even in good financial, economic times. So this is all the more reason why we've got to be about encouraging and supporting others. We've got to pick up the phone, drop a card, but particularly those voices, that friendly voice. And for those who are not adverse to hugs, hugging is a good thing. And for those who are, try some alternative hugging, some maybe flowers or a balloon animal or something very creative. But make sure you encourage. F.
F is for follow-up. Are you making arrangements for following up, especially during the holiday seasons? And we haven't mentioned and won't mention, but need to mention that, hey, if you're not getting contact information from those first-time guests who are coming, and that includes like for Christmas Eve, but Christmas Eve is the #1 time for unchurched people to show up. How are you going to get their contact information? And when you get it, how are you going to follow up within 24 hours? Because that's important. So follow up.
Well, G is for grounds, as in your property outside, what it looks like. Are your leaves raked? Is your sign up to date? Are things very well lit? Does it look spiffy? And even Currier and Ives kind of feel to it. You know, is it picturesque? Is it the kind of building that somebody might want to take a picture of, or is it looking more shabby? Curb appeal, curb appeal, curb appeal.
It's all about people wanting to come back and be there. Okay, handoffs. What's next? H is for handoff, so okay.
H,
so we're H. Yeah, it's like, hey, moving along. All right, handoffs. And a handoff is what comes next. When a guest comes to your worship, when he or she shows up during Advent or on Christmas Eve, what are they being invited to specifically that will be of interest to them, that will say, oh man, we need to go to that. So if you're targeting your Christmas Eve service, and you are, whether you mean to target it or not, whoever it is that you believe is going to be best targeted, whether it's families or seniors or etc., the follow-up needs to match that. So what follow-ups do you have coming up, and what is the handoff to invite them to it? You can make a flyer, you can, of course, make an announcement, but you want to make sure you put something in their hands that they'll hang on to, whether it's a fridge magnet or something, so that they can get it on their calendar and come if they're interested.
Well, this is very closely related to it. I is for invitation. How are we expressing those invitations? And you know, it's one thing for us to have the flyers and the follow-up pieces to hand out, but it's
when they come.
When they come, right. It's something else, though, to help enable our congregation, everybody, to be able to extend invitations. Vistaprint.com, we need to get stock in that deal. Anyways, Vistaprint.com, they're wonderful for getting up quick flyers, quick cards, and you can put your upcoming holiday times, dates, special services, offerings that you may, not offerings, but special offerings, like, you know, special songs or cantatas, whatever that you may be doing that will be of interest. And hand out 5 to everybody in church. Give them 5 once a month between November and December. That's only 10 people that they need to invite. They may not know their names. We're going to help them to invite. And I want to add with that is to pray, help your congregation to pray about how they can invite and who they can invite. But keep those invitations in front of them.
Well, speaking of pray, J is for Jesus,
Woo!
Which is the reason for the season.
Thank you.
No, we're not advocating getting badges or going to war with the holiday merchants, however they come down this year on the Merry Christmas thing. But this is the time of the year to specifically remind ourselves that prayer is important. Taking some time to meditate, to step aside, and we're going to talk more about taking some time in a little bit. But you know, if Jesus is the focus, let's make sure we're focusing. And I have to say that, you know, I have a personal bias sort of against the lectionary during this season, because it's all about, the lectionary follows the prophets and all that. And although it's leading up to Jesus, maybe a little more conversation about Jesus and et cetera than the anticipation of might not be a bad thing. But spend some time in prayer, spend some time in focus, and help your congregation spend some time on what is this really all about? Because it's not all about us and getting gifts. It's all about Jesus and the gifts that we bring him.
Because of the gift that he brings us,
That's
right? Okay, well, K is for kiosk, as in information booth or an information kiosk, but it's some place that's out there, really prominent, where people have to pass by it when they come and when they go, where people can ask questions, where they can get more information, where they can pick up some brochures, where they can get flyers, whatever it is about the ministries, about the foci of your congregation. And very important, and important to always have someone there at the kiosk, or someone's, because hopefully you have more than just one or two people that are coming by to talk about that, to answer their questions, not to talk about the weather, not to talk about what's going on in football.
Or to get involved with each other in conversations.
Oh, no. It's to have those conversations with our guests and to get them excited about the church as well.
And one of the things I want to just add to the whole kiosk thing is the people who staff your kiosk, man your kiosk, whatever you want to say, those information people should be some of your sharpest cookies in your church. They should know almost everything about the church, so they can answer almost any question that may come up, because that's, of course, what they're there for, is to provide that information. Well, L is for liturgy. Liturgy is essentially your order of service and the way we do things and so on and so forth. And even in a church that has, quote unquote, a free liturgy, there's a liturgy. I've never really gone to a church, and I've heard of them, but I've also gone to churches that told me they were free liturgy, and then I went a second and third time and realized they just have an unstated liturgy.
And if you changed one little piece of it,
all heck would come up.
Right?
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so, think through it. One of the things that we often don't do is think through how our songs move us from the edge of worship and about God and about each other into singing to God and into singing commitment thereof. So, be thinking about your total liturgy. How does it move people from being out here where they're coming into your worship services with all sorts of stuff? This is a high-stress season. How do we help them divest their stuff and focus in? And how does that worship service, how does the liturgy carry them through? It's incredibly critical in this time of year. It's important always, but during this time of year, people come with more baggage than almost at any other time. So how are you going to help them through that, through your liturgy?
Well, this is, again, very closely related. M is for message. Message. Now, when a lot of us preacher types hear message, we think, oh, the sermon, the message.
Which, of course, is part of it.
It's part of it, but it's everything
That's
that
right.
we say and do. It's how we communicate to people our values, what's important to us, our vision, where God is calling us to be. And again, if we're excited about all of that, it's easy then, or easier for other people, particularly our guests, to get excited about that too. So what are you communicating? Now, when it comes to those messages, preaching, sermon messages, let's move beyond the gee whiz. Let's give you a lot of information. Let's talk about the way things were in the past. Often when we think about prophets and we talk and we're preaching through this Advent, this countdown to Christmas, and we are using the prophets and we're talking about things in the past, but that connection with where we are today seems to be missing. And preachers out there, I want to give you a challenge this year. I want you to step away from those helps perhaps that you use to write your sermons or to develop your liturgy, and talk from the depth of your heart. What are you experiencing with Jesus and with God? How is Jesus's birth making a difference? Not how has it made a difference. How is that making a difference in your life, in your community, in your congregation? Communicate that, communicate that, communicate that. Because what people are looking for in life is a relevant, authentic, life-changing message.
And I'll point out to that, or I'll add to that, is that it's not just your story that's important. You want testimonies of others whose lives are changing, because everyone expects the pastor's life to be changing. What about the rest of your congregation?
Well, I want to say, so pick up on something you just said. You talked about changing and how your life is changing. The word I'd rather us use right now is impacting. How is your relationship with God impacting your life? Because, some people may say, well, my life isn't really changing. And we are often in those seasons and long seasons of there. But how is your life being impacted? It's that so what question. So what? Why does it matter? What's the big deal? People need deals these days.
I just want to add one more thing to that about your values piece, because if you're espousing a year of peace, if you're talking about and have a value of the camaraderie and working together, then if you have unresolved conflict, what you're saying doesn't match what you're doing. So this is the season to bury some hatchets and to make sure that your values reflect the values of Christianity. All right. N is for nursery. A nursery is a key cornerstone of your reaching out into your community if you plan on reaching families, especially young families. And so we invite you to consider, are your 5 S's covered? Do you have a staff? How are you doing with staff? Is it, do you have the right people in the right places, and do you have the right numbers? Do you have a safe nursery? Is it a sanitary nursery? Is it a secure nursery? And does it have sizzle? And if you need more information, you can go find the 5 S's in our archives, the on-demand section of our website, and take a look at that session because we deal with it extensively. So N is for nursery and O is for
one anothering, how we work with and treat one another. And there can be a lot going on at Christmas time and a lot in this holiday season, we'll say it that way, and a lot of expectations. If you're in the choir, you got the choir party. If you're in the Sunday school, you got a Sunday school party. If you got a small group, you got a small group party, and on and on and on and on and on it goes. And we get one anothered out. But the problem is often those are things that we feel like we have to do, and so we show up and we only bring a part of us, and for some of us that aren't really comfortable in these big groups, they're parties. Where's that going on? And yet, Christmas really is about this one anothering, this giving of oneself to another, to us. And so now we want to ask, so how could you one another with somebody else? What gift could you give? Not a monetary gift, but a gift of time, a gift of quality. How can you move past that hustle and bustle and the expectations and the requirements or the perceived requirements to really do something genuine with someone else, particularly someone who may not have many others in their lives?
This is a good season to really consider not doing some parties, not scheduling some parties, so that you're taking care of one another, so that families can take care of their one another's. As you said, the small group party, the choir party, the church party, What if you just did one party and, and took some things off the calendar? Because church, we put too much on the calendar normally, and we go overboard during this holiday season. Consider what you can remove. All right, well, parking. P is for parking. When you just think about parking, you need to be looking out again at your grounds. Is your parking lot in good repair? A lot of people get hurt falling across broken asphalt. Is it well lit? Is your parking lot a safe place to be? Do you have places for your guests to park? You should have about 3 to 5%, up to 10% of your parking spots designated for guests. How about handicapped? Are they well marked, or are the blue lines fading out into oblivion? Are you going to have, or do you need, and you do need, parking lot attendants and parking lot greeters, especially for your high attendance expectations during Advent? Where is your parking lot in the scheme of your holiday hospitality, that holiday checklist? Be thinking about that even now.
Yes. Well, Q is for quality. Often we say, well, it's good enough. But is good enough really good enough, particularly for your guests? You want to put your best foot forward, or your best face forward, I guess you'd say. Again, one of the indicators is when you have people over to your home, what is good enough, and generally we move towards an excellence. Now, excellence is not perfection. It doesn't mean, it has to be way, way over the top. It's what's excellent for you. for your congregation. It would be very helpful right now to pull out last year's bulletins for all of November, December, and January and go through and look at everything on those bulletins, everything you've done. Look at the order of the bulletins, or use your current bulletin for that. Look at your newsletter and how you're communicating, and pick up a scale of, let's say, 1 to 4, with 4 being excellent and 1 being not acceptable, and rate that and see how you can move everything into those 3 and 4 categories and be working towards that good, great, excellent quality.
And remember that excellence is based on the size of your congregation as well, your average worship attendance. You can't expect and should not expect the level of excellence in a 50 average worship attendance congregation compared to a 5,000 member congregation or average worship congregation. So, what is the level of excellence? But your level of hospitality, that excellence, should be there from the beginning to the end, and it should be matched all the way through. All right, so R is for restrooms. The number one thing about restrooms is, do they pass the sniff and sight test? Do they smell like a locker room, or do they smell like you've walked into a fresh forest? And if you're walking into the guys' room, have you walked into a boudoir that has been decorated and scented by women? Or is it walking into something that is a little on the masculine side, and vice versa for the women? So be thinking about, is it clean? Does it look nice? Does it smell nice? And if you're going to scent it, and if you're going to have soaps in there, are the soaps gender specific? Does the guy's hand soap smell like, again, lavender? Or does it smell like, Gojo or something along those lines? I was just going to say, like Gojo. Yeah, exactly.
What's kind of the difference between forests and flowers?
There you are.
Right?
Yeah, excellent.
If you can think in terms of forests and flowers.
Excellent. And one more thing is there a changing table in both genders? Because, sometimes us guys, we get stuck with having to...
Stuck?
Yes, we do. And having to change that dirty diaper. And so, do you have one in both sides? All right, moving on.
Wait a minute. I want to add candies, too.
Oh, candies. Yes, all right. Exactly, because that's what we want, is have food available in our restrooms. All right, moving on to signage.
Signage. Well, mints. I like mints.
Okay, all right.
Okay, signage. Okay, so, all right, your restrooms are clean, but can anybody find them? And when they, let alone can they find them inside or outside? We were somewhere recently, and I was on the trail of a restroom, and it was not the easiest thing to find. So signs, not just for your restrooms, though, but for classrooms, the nursery. Oh, my goodness, that's got to be right up front. Outside signage, very important. We did an episode recently on signage here on Church Talk. So, again, you can go to our, what do you call them, on demand, and look, do a search for them. You could find more about signage. And we don't want to forget the signage rule of thumb. That's the line of sight. So if from anywhere you stand, anywhere in the church, there should be a sign that tells you where the sanctuary is, where the restrooms are, and where, or at least the closest restroom is, and where the nursery is. So line of sight, anywhere you would be, you can see a sign that has points to all 3 of those.
That way no one can ever get lost. All right, T is for technology. Technology. Now, when we normally think of Christmas services, we normally think of backing off of technology, and yet that's exactly the opposite of what you need to do. First thing, who are you trying to reach? What's the average age, and how digital are they? And in today's age, the 70-year-olds are about as digital as everybody else.
Yeah, it's
but
true.
The other piece is that, how do we help them? How do we help them to communicate or to connect with the message to our communication? And the best way through that is technology. And we're not talking about a loud band. What we're talking about is screen technology, and using that screen technology seamlessly in order to bring people into a place that gets them centered on what you're trying to help them center on. And so, using screen technology with more than just words. There's a new movement out called atmospheric or environmental screen technology that uses wraparound and can create a whole scene across the front of your church using multiple projectors. All sorts of opportunities today to open up the modern day stained glass windows, which is what technology does, and that's what screen technology does, is it makes stained glass windows, if you will, possible for all of our participants. Is the technology matching? And then, you know, on top of that is, if you're going to use PowerPoint or Media Shout or whatever you're using for the words of your songs, please proofread. There's nothing worse than having misspellings, miscues, and mispunctuation, because, you know, some of us notice that kind of thing.
Oh, we do, don't we? All right, and with technology, let's not forget that there's a whole bunch of us that are on Twitter, that are Facebook technology, you know, that social media technology, that are doing text messaging and whatnot. And so to think creatively about how you can bring that in, we've got to move beyond saying, put your phones away, to realizing that people are going to be on their phones. And if they're going to be on their phones, then give them some ideas of what they could be tweeting, or of what they could be saying to their friends about where they could be texting questions that they might have about the message. You know, might have an elder, if you're lucky to have an associate pastor or somebody, you know, one of your teachers sitting on the side that could be answering in real time questions that are being sent to them about what's being said.
Use the technology you got. All right.
There it is. Okay, well, U is for ushers, and we're going to add with this greeters and hosts. So ushers, greeters, and hosts.
Oh my.
Oh my. And again, to give a little shout out, we've got a series on this, the hospitality series, talks about ushers, greeters, and hosts. So you thinking that greeters from the parking lot in all the way in through the doors, greeting people and helping them. Hosts, same thing. Hosts are helping to move people, or helping to greet people as well, to have conversations with folks. And ushers are there to help people find seats, to help people move in when you need more seats.
No guest should ever have to do what you have experienced of trying to climb over people to get to a seat in the middle. That's the usher's job, to say, excuse me, Miss Finn, we need you to move in, and and get people into the middle of the pews, so there are seats on the outside so guests can slide in without having to step on toes. That's their job. Don't leave that to a guest. So ushers should ush.
No matter how wide your pews or your seats are placed for accessibility.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
All right. So now, okay, TUV.
V is for visitor sensitivity, which we would say is look at everything we've covered so far and everything yet to come. But are you focusing on making sure your visitors are as welcome and at home and feeling as comfortable as they possibly can? Because let's remember that the reason the church exists is for those who are not there yet. Those guests and visitors are the ones we're trying to introduce Jesus Christ to. Those of us who've been a part of the church for a long time, hopefully we've already made that connection, and we're just getting better. And the way to get better is by making sure that we are reaching visitors for Jesus Christ. So keep that key on everything else you're doing.
So W stands for worship. Worship has got to be awe-inspiring, it's got to be authentic, and it's got to be relevant. Again, I've been to too many services where Jesus' name isn't even mentioned. And if all you're doing is talking about Jesus, the little baby who's going to come, you're lost.
Missed the boat.
I'm sorry. Yeah, because worship is about helping. It's really, worship is creating an environment, is creating space for people to get to engage in maybe not so much a relationship, but hopefully an experience of, but at least a touch of the divine, to be tangibly touched by God and by Jesus. So worship, again, that's awe-inspiring, that's authentic, and that's relevant.
And it isn't so cram-packed as boom, 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 that people don't have an opportunity to reflect and embrace and to feel that and make that real connection with the divine.
I'm not sure that everybody is able to do this, but I would suggest to you that you think about your service and get a sense. Do you have this feeling that you're just kind of moving from start to finish, and going through the motions? Again, so many congregations that we worship with, that's the sense. Could we get done with this fast enough? And that's not awe-inspiring or relevant. It really is engaging. It's conversational.
Right. Yep. And Christmas time music is majestic, not rushed.
Well, you get to do X.
All right, X. X stands for exit. Hey, it's the best we could do, because the other thing is X-ray or xylophone, and we just couldn't do either of those.
Exit's great.
Exit, okay. And the question is, do you have an exit strategy? Very often in our churches, especially during the Christmas Eve service, for instance, we have no exit strategy. And even in our regular weekly worship service, we often don't have an exit strategy. The pastor goes down to the door and says goodbye to those who happen to go out that door. But exit strategies means having your greeters in place before the exit starts so that they can thank people for coming, invite them to return. Really, that's important, inviting them to return. That's why even stores that do the come again, hey, there's a reason they do that, because it works.
I hope to see you next week.
Yep, that's
Isn't
right.
even better. I hope to see you again. And another piece with that is have a great week.
Exactly.
It goes a long way.
All right. So, and is there an exit strategy for your guests on a crowded service? How do we get our guests out of the parking lot smoothly?
Via the kiosk.
Via the kiosk, if you can. But I'm talking about parking at this moment,
what you're talking
so
about.
that they can get out and move along.
Yes.
And maybe the members can sort of hang back, and the parking lot traffic jam can happen a little less. With a little more decor, if you will, a little more decorum. All right, Y is for?
Yes, yes, yes. How are you helping people say yes to Jesus, particularly during this season? Now, I'm not talking about altar calls. If that's your response to that question, how are you helping people to say yes? Oh, we give an altar call every Sunday, or we extend the invitation to discipleship. No, no, and no. It goes way beyond that. And it's for people, not only those who've made a profession of faith, but those who've not yet made a profession of faith. So how are you helping them to say yes to whatever Jesus may be calling them and you as a congregation to do? Be explicit about that, extend that invitation, give them a challenge, give them homework to follow up with it, follow up. Yes.
And the last one is for zip and zing, which really goes back to your worship as well, and the awe-inspiringness and all that, is that your worship should flow through, and we do want to build in space for reflection and meditation in the right services, but we also want those to be intentional. Far too often our services are marred by waiting for the choir to get up, waiting for the choir to sit down, waiting for the liturgists to make their way across the podium, or whatever's coming next while we twiddle our thumbs. If you have more than 2.5 seconds of silence, you have lost people.
Wait, silence that's not built.
Right, unintentional silence, right. Unintentional silence. People the transition should be smooth, should be boom, boom, boom. If you got people speaking, the Advent calendar or the Advent candle thing, and they're lighting the candles and they're moving forward. People should be talking until they're talking. There should be none of this transitional, oops, blank spaces, unless again they're intentional. Zip and zing, move things through. Your worship services should sizzle just like your nursery, and it should be a fabulous, fabulous worship season, holiday season, as you reach your guests and your visitors by putting together and following the ABCs of Holiday Checklist.
And we're out of time.
We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.